What if you woke up in another world and could create dragons? No magic, no talent, but with one secret, a system that creates legendary dragons, fire, ice, light, and darkness dragons. He goes from zero to legend by training his own dragons and facing mages, nobles, and even family betrayals. Magic Academy. But the more power he gains, the closer he gets to a dark secret. Not everything that shines is magic. From nobody to the legend of dragons. Start creating dragons today. In the Arandi Empire, in the Lanster Fief, at a school, the teacher told the children that today they would learn about mages. She said that meditation is very important, as long as a person can concentrate and that anyone can do it. Among the children, there was a slightly older boy. He wondered if that was really true. His name was Lynn Lanster. He felt a bit down, as it had already been 8 years since he'd entered preschool. Some brats his age had already become mages capable of being independent. However, he still couldn't even meditate. He looked at his hand, saying that if he wanted to discover the truth from that year, then he needed to become a sage-level mage. Suddenly, something hit his face. The children ran to him, apologizing because they had been distracted while practicing magic and got carried away. One child asked why Lynn didn't use a shield to block. Another scolded him, asking what he was talking about. Since unfortunately their young master hadn't even graduated from preschool, how could he use any kind of magic? The child who had cast the spell looked confused, asking why, if the Lord's magic was so powerful, Lynn was still a beginner. Another child said it was because the young master was an orphan adopted by the Lord. They began talking among themselves, wondering if a nameless street boy like that was worthy of being the Lord's heir. While they talked, the protagonist began to feel extremely offended for not having graduated preschool, for being an orphan, and for being called a street boy. The children went back to playing, and Lynn thought those brats really knew how to stab a person in the heart. Suddenly, a commanding and frightening voice asked one of the boys what he was babbling about. The boy started crying and could barely explain himself. However, the protagonist asked Carl to lower his sword. The knight looked confused and glanced at the protagonist, giving the children a chance to run. Carl told the young master that he must let him punish the children severely. Lynn stood up and said that even so, Carl couldn't use that kind of method. He asked if the sword the king had granted him was meant to be used against commoners. Carl was left speechless, then bowed and apologized, saying he wouldn't do anything foolish again. The protagonist said it was fine and decided to change the subject, asking why Carl was there. The knight shouted that he had almost forgotten the reason. He said the protagonist had received a letter from Oliver and should return to check it. Lynn was surprised to hear that because Oliver was the one who helped hide his real name the year his father had an accident. He was the benefactor who hid him there. Lynn returned to the palace. He thought that Oliver knew he couldn't sense magic and had been trying to help him in every way possible. The protagonist got off the carriage happily, thinking Oliver must have discovered something this time. He entered the estate and greeted his father, saying he was back. The man turned and told Lynn to go study quickly. This man was the elder brother of the protagonist's mother. His name was Blaine Lanster. He said he had Oliver's message and would like to hear it with him. Lynn thought he should call Blaine uncle, but to avoid exposing his true identity, they had to be known to the outside world as father and adopted son. Blaine used a bit of magic, asking the little statue to read the letter. The statue's eyes began to glow and repeated exactly what was written in the letter. "Greetings, Duke Blaine. I was wandering and happened to stumble upon a peculiar magic book. Perhaps this will help Lynn awaken his magic." Suddenly, the book emerged from the small statue and flew straight into the protagonist's hands. He was surprised to see the book was made of animal bones and remarked that the material was indeed quite peculiar. However, even with the book in hand, he lowered his gaze, a bit disheartened, thinking that so many years had passed and no matter how much he tried, he couldn't awaken his true magic. This made him look at the book and wonder if this time he would succeed. That, as his uncle already knew, his father's betrayal wasn't such a simple matter, because before, if Lynn came home just 5 minutes late, his father would become extremely anxious and fly across the entire city looking for his son. However, now his father is trapped in the dragon territory, and unfortunately, he doesn't even know if he's alive or not. Lynn lifts his face, smiling, and says that, as a true son, he can't just ignore that. Time passes, and night falls. The protagonist goes to his room and lies on his bed. He looks at the book and says he knows his uncle is doing this for him. However, he says that as long as there's a chance to find his father, he won't give up. Because if there's a 1% chance, he'll have 99% faith. The protagonist starts to think that even though he feels that way, in his memories, his father rarely came home. He starts remembering when he was just a child and hears his mother saying that his father brought new toys for him. He thinks that even though his father rarely returned home, every time he did, he would do everything he could to make him and his mother the happiest people in the world. His father always brought new gifts and surprises, and asked how he was feeling and if that toy was more fun than the others he already had. He gave love, affection, and attention whenever he could. Lynn's mother asks Zoe if he's leaving again. He turns and replies, yes, asking her not to worry, because if everything goes well, that will be the last expedition. Zoe states that next time he returns, he won't need to leave again, and that way their family will be able to continue living happily. However, the protagonist remembers that this was the last time he saw his father because he never came back. And not only that, but his mother also vanished. So, if he wants to mend this broken family, maybe he's the only one who can do it. He wonders if that magic book can really help him awaken. He points out that the learning method recorded inside is completely different from orthodox magic. He gets out of bed, saying that whatever the result, he has already failed countless times. So what's one more failure? He begins to focus, thinking there's no harm in trying. He starts to gather his aggressive energy and draw it close to his body. However, something goes wrong and he gets frustrated and punches the wall, saying once it hatches, the dragon will eat him alive. Suddenly, he hears a noise and looks to the side, seeing the egg shell cracking. He gets scared as he sees part of the dragon already sticking out. The system, still injured from the protagonist's attack, says that this is a friendly reminder and explains that if he doesn't drip some of his own blood onto the dragon egg before the shell fully breaks, the dragon will indeed eat him after hatching. This makes Lin even more terrified. Time is running out, and even without understanding what's happening, he takes some of his blood, saying he has to do this to form a bond with that kind of monster that has the power to destroy the world. Before the egg finally cracks, he jumps in to place his blood. Suddenly, an unimaginable amount of energy bursts out of the egg, throwing the protagonist far away. He slowly opens his eyes and asks if he succeeded. Looking in front of him, he sees a small baby dragon. He's even a little relieved, wondering if that's really a dragon. The most terrifying dragon's language, probably thanks to the system. Several system windows pop up in front of him saying, task completed. Congratulations on acquiring your first dragon. Dragon Creator. You have earned 5 experience points and 50 gold. You've been awarded the beginner reward, 1,000 gold. The system explains that gold can be used to buy feed, field structures, and field expansions. System gold and real-world gold are equivalent at a 1-to-1 exchange rate. Lin starts to get a little more excited and asks if he can really use real money. The system asks him to continue the main task and explains that he needs to build a fire-type dragon nest. The reward is 5 experience points and 50 gold. The protagonist holds the baby dragon in his hands and asks if he really has to build a fire-type dragon nest, because if that's true, then he should build a home for that little hatchling. The baby dragon starts to get angry and tries to breathe fire at the protagonist, saying that no one would appreciate a house made by a human and asking if he's joking. However, Lin doesn't even care about what the baby dragon is saying and starts messing with the system. He notices he can build a beginner fire-type dragon nest with just 100 gold, and that's not expensive at all. The dragon keeps complaining, asking the protagonist to let him go because how could he use a house made by a human? Suddenly, something starts being built nearby, and quickly the system notifies that the area has been expanded and congratulates him for completing the task, stating that he earned 5 experience points and 50 gold. Beginner Fire-type Dragon Nest, Fire-type Dragon's Paradise. Growth, 1 more day, can hold up to 500 gold. Seeing that, the little dragon is completely delighted by the place. Without a second thought, he jumps right into the little volcano, enjoying the moment. Lin asks the hatchling if he didn't just say he didn't want that and calls him a big liar. But at least, he says, his body is honest. The protagonist looks at his little dragon and says that, with the way it keeps yelling ya 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 all the time, it should just be called ya ya. However, he hears a noise and, paying attention to the dragon, notices that it's asleep. He's surprised, saying that this creature really has a very simple mind. After the dragon falls asleep, the protagonist decides to follow some of the system's instructions and completes a few basic tasks. Everything is finished with just a few taps. It's quite comfortable to be a dragon breeder. The plants he planted are dragon-scale fruits, one of the dragon race's favorite fruits. Their growth period is only 1 day. After feeding, the dragon's growth will increase by 10. Lin looks at the system and says he's awakened the dragon and completed all tasks and asks if he can leave now. The system tells him to use the command exit to leave that place. When he snaps his fingers and says exit, the entire world he was in begins to fade away and he returns to his bed. As he slowly opens his eyes, he realizes several people are around him. He asks why everyone is there staring at him. The people are shocked by him. He asks what happened for them to be so stunned. Carl and a young man tell him to look at the ceiling, and as he does, he sees that it's completely destroyed. The two cheer, saying the young master managed to blow up the ceiling. Even he is shocked, asking how he did that. Trying to dodge the subject, he asks if it's really worth selling. Shortly after, the protagonist says that neither Carl nor his uncle felt anything unusual after reading the book, so maybe only he can enter that mysterious space. And every time he tries to meditate, he ends up coughing blood. The system appears, warning that the dragon's level will be the limit of his magic level. Forcing it too much could cause the user's body to explode. Lin must quickly raise the fire dragon Yiya to level 1. Until the dragon reaches level 1, the user cannot use magic. After receiving this information, he realizes that all this time, it was the system that limited his magic power absorption. Frustrated with this situation, Lin tries not to return to the ranch. However, that damn butler invades his real life, even showing up outside the subspace saying that the food is insufficient and therefore the fire dragon Yiya's health dropped to -10. He tries to just keep eating and ignore that message, but the system starts yelling at him, saying that while maybe he can ignore his own basic needs, asks if he's really going to the Holy Iris Academy. The Sagrada Academy is the best magic academy in the Orande Empire. Oliver and the protagonist's father were both students there. Zoe was one of the most talented students in the entire academy. Says yes, and emphasizes that it can give even more. The protagonist asks what that means. Suddenly, the place starts changing, and the butler says that the fire dragon, Yiya, has successfully reached level 1. And with that, the protagonist has unlocked the magical training room. The butler asks why he doesn't try the first lesson inside the training room. As soon as he enters, the first thing he must do is the meditation balance board. Lin tries to balance, saying he won't fall the moment he loses concentration. So how is he supposed to concentrate and meditate? A timer appears, and after 5 seconds, the butler warns that time's up and the meditation failed, so he'll now drop the hammer of retribution. The hammer starts falling with 40 tons. The protagonist is extremely scared, saying that's brutal. However, the hammer hits him in the face, hurting him. But before he falls, something grabs his foot and pulls him back onto the board. He's confused, not knowing what the hell is going on. The butler says that unless he successfully meditates, he'll never be able to leave the balance board. And if he fails to meditate for 5 seconds, the hammer of retribution will be released again. Seeing he has no way out, he tries his best to focus and asks the system if it's trying to train him or kill him. However, 5 seconds pass and he can't concentrate. This time, 80 tons hit him. This happens over and over until finally, he starts to focus. And the butler congratulates him for completing the training, stating that he has just leveled up. With his face all bruised, he smiles, because he's now at level 1. Sometime later, he goes into the forest and says it's been 7 days of hard training, so he should now be able to experience all that power. He activates his magic perception, and magic begins to standing there. Jack runs off, shouting that the young master can use fire magic. The protagonist is so embarrassed, he yells for him to shut up and not tell anyone something so humiliating. However, a small attack shoots toward Jack, but he manages to dodge. Lin is asking him to take care of himself as much as possible. And with that heartfelt farewell, Lin Lanster finally stepped onto the road for the first time to become a great mage. It takes about a month by carriage to travel from the fief to the academy. During the day, Jack would guide them to the academy, and at night, the protagonist would go to the ranch to train and raise his dragons. Without even noticing it, the little dragon kept getting bigger. Yiya was now a bit annoyed, staring at the protagonist. Lin asks why Yiya is looking at him like that. Currently, the little dragon's stats are Level 3, Skills Dragon Breath, Dragon Power, Fire Magic Immunity, Magic Bite, Fireball, Shield, Habitat, Small Fire Dragon Nest. A red message appears saying the situation is critical due to overcrowding. Exit, 10 gold coins per minute. Growth value, 3 out of 500. Health value, 100 out of 100. Suddenly, the dragon attacks the protagonist, saying it wants a new habitat. Lin gets scared, saying that this little hatchling is much more lovable than the butler. The protagonist says he'll give him a new habitat, but before that, he wants the dragon to come with him to see the outside world. Yiya stares at the protagonist, asking if he's being serious. The butler says that upon receiving the farmer master's command, he will transfer the host and Yiya to the designated location. The dragon starts getting excited. Lin asks what's wrong and if he's scared, but the dragon says that's nonsense. He's not afraid of anything. However, at the exact moment the two are teleported out, someone notices and opens their eyes. A powerful warrior with a giant dragon asks why there is a dragon outside the Rift Valley. Yiya slowly opens his eyes and asks his master where they are. He says that place is much bigger than that miserable place he was in before. The protagonist asks Yiya if he's enjoying it and if he wants to fly around a bit. The dragon gets extremely happy and spreads his wings. After a month, the protagonist gradually realigned his thoughts, realizing there's no getting rid of that strange ranch, so he might as well work with it. Lin decided he will help raise dragons, and that will help him grow stronger and stronger, until he can find his father and clear his family's name. Suddenly, an arrow comes flying toward them, but Yiya manages to dodge. Lin gets scared and wonders if there are dragon hunters around. However, a small explosion occurs in the forest and cries for help begin to echo. But he also hears people saying they must not retreat, because this is the caravan's last hope. He also hears someone saying they shouldn't care about the caravan because if they do, they'll die quietly. And that's exactly why they must deliver the goods. The protagonist asks if this is a robbery. He continues hearing voices pleading for help and mercy until suddenly he hears someone shouting for the young master. He instantly recognizes the voice and realizes that little Jack is also caught in the middle of all that. Serpents were surrounding them while they were tied to a tree. Jack was starting to cry. He thought his young master had been so focused on practicing magic that he lost a lot of weight. So Jack decided to go out and look for some food for him. However, as he was passing by the caravan, a group of bad guys came out from the forest. They quickly defeated all the soldiers guarding the caravan. Their leader approached the head of the Mason Trade Guild, named Lucas, and demanded he reveal where the goods were hidden. Otherwise, his entire group would be destroyed one by one. The bandit leader used one of his snakes to attack a soldier who quickly began to die. He warned that this would continue if the leader didn't cooperate. Lucas started to panic as he saw his companions falling, but even so, he shut his eyes and began to cry. Trembling, he said he couldn't do it because the buyer of those goods was extremely powerful. If they lost them, they'd be crushed and unable to sell anything ever again. The bandit leader stared at him and said it was fine. They'd keep going anyway. He snapped his fingers and a snake slithered each other, and the bandit said that if that fire magic was cast by the brat in front of them, then he must be at least a third-level mage. But the leader, still furious, asked if a third-level mage was enough to make them all wet their pants. He asked if they had forgotten who the real leader of the gang was. Drawing his sword, he said he was also a third-level knight and that, compared to a mage who needed chanting, knights had absolute dominance in close combat. He attacked, but the protagonist dodged and was surprised by the strength of his opponent. The bandit leader continued to attack fiercely while Lin tried to evade all his strikes. He thought the bandit was right. Mages have no advantage in close-quarters combat. Plus, it was Yaya who cast that fire spell, but to avoid revealing the existence of his dragon, Lin had ordered him to return to the ranch immediately. The bandit leader kept charging and asked Lin if dodging was all he could do. With a quick movement, he appeared behind Lin, who was surprised by his speed. The protagonist tried to dodge, but not fast enough. The attack grazed him and sent him flying. Wounded, he got up trembling, thinking he couldn't keep dodging forever. At least all that time spent on the ranch was paying off, since he had increased his agility and mental strength in the training room. Now he had to fight. He began gathering magic in his hand and called out to the flames. But before he could finish the chant, the bandit leader struck and said he was so naive it was almost cute. He added that in front of a knight of equal level, a mage had absolutely no chance in a fight. Then he threw the protagonist hard against a rock. After taking so many hits, Lin him. Suddenly, the system appeared, stating that it had detected the ranch master was if the instant fireball was the ability the hatchling got after eating the dragon scale fruit, and he was extremely shocked to discover he could actually use the dragon's magic. The butler confirms that it's all true, and melts the cage that held her. He reaches out and tells her there's no need to be afraid. He's there to free her. A bit hesitant, having only been treated as merchandise until now, she avoids his hand at first, but eventually accepts his help and steps out of the cage. He asks if the flames hurt her. Shy, she lowers her gaze and thanks him, but he smiles and says it was nothing. The protagonist introduces himself as Lin, and if she doesn't mind, asks for her name. The elf becomes even more embarrassed. He also feels a bit embarrassed, thinking that she got startled too easily, like a little bunny. He tries to ease the situation by saying it's okay if she doesn't want to tell him her name, since they'll meet again anyway. He turns around and starts walking away, telling her she should leave that place and not let anyone else capture her. But she suddenly shouts no, and even though she's very shy, she starts trying to speak and yells that her name is Nike. Still introverted, she says that if she told him her name, then he wouldn't push her away. The elf grabs the protagonist's arm, showing a bit of fear and gratitude. Meanwhile, little Jack was roasting some meat. He laughed happily, saying he finally managed to get some meat for his master. Inside the carriage, Nike was eating very quickly, like she hadn't eaten in days. Lin gets startled and tells her to slow down or she might choke. He asks if she wants some water, and the elf is surprised, quickly taking the cup from his hand and starting to drink. He then asks why, after finally gaining her freedom, she chose to stay by his humans everywhere. The humans were angry because the elves had been there just the day before. However, one of them said they shouldn't keep complaining and should search a bit more around because even finding a single elf could bring in a lot of money. Suddenly, one of the soldiers heard a noise and looked to the side, seeing a flower basket. Nike began running through the forest as fast as she could, thinking how the chief of her clan had already won. That's why she desperately tried to escape and find the members of her clan. But no matter how many times she tried to run, she was always captured in the end. While telling her story, she trembled, cried, and kept her head down because her whole life, her family, and her home had been completely destroyed and taken from her by force. The protagonist becomes extremely angry hearing this and slams the table, calling those people nothing but bandits. The elf is startled by his anger, but He quickly calms down and says that anger wasn't directed at her. A bit awkward, he admits he's also human and asks if she's afraid of him. But Nike says no, which surprises him. She emphasizes that he is her benefactor. She remembers that he said merchants treat life like merchandise and that he wouldn't accept that. That's why she believes he's different from the bad men. Lin looks at the elf a bit embarrassed and says it was nothing, adding that since she feels that way, she can follow him for now. And if they find clues about the whereabouts of the elf clan, he'll help her return. Nike smiles happily and thanks him. He explains that he's heading to the academy now, but only staff are allowed to stay on school grounds. The elf starts getting excited, and he says that if she doesn't mind, she could pretend to be his maid. Upon hearing that, she goes silent, begins to tremble, and even stammers, saying her grandfather once told her that maid is an extremely dangerous word, but still she believes she can do it. Lin gets flustered and shouts that she's getting the wrong idea, stressing that he won't make her do anything weird, and explains that all she needs to do is call him young master and change her clothes. He also says that as for everyone else, she doesn't need to worry about them. This calms her down and she starts smiling again, saying it's fine, calling him young master. Lin breathes a little easier, thinking that apparently everything's cleared up now. He turns and starts leaving the carriage, saying it's already getting late and that she should sleep inside the carriage that night, while he'll sleep outside with little Jack. As soon as he steps out, Jack asks why his master left the carriage. He asks if he's not welcome there. Little Jack says he's always welcome, but just can't understand why he'd make that choice, since a beautiful lady is right there inside the carriage, and yet he still wants to sleep outside. The protagonist gets a bit annoyed and tells him to stop saying things like that. 3 days later, once they arrived at the academy, he begins to wonder if Oliver already knew there were dragons inside the book when he sent it. Suddenly, the butler appears, saying that it has detected the host's arrival at the Holy Iris Academy. He tells him to explore the academy to find quest clues and unlock the water dragon egg. Lin is surprised to learn that there are other dragons. The butler tells the farmer not to be so dismissive and asks if having more dragons wouldn't make him stronger. The protagonist asks if he can really get stronger. The system says yes, and emphasizes that the farmer has only hatched 1 dragon egg so far, and that his current status is Farmer Lin, first-class mage level, total unlocked species, 1. The butler explains that as long as the farmer continues to complete missions and unlock the 6 dragon egg types, fire, water, wind, earth, light, and darkness, then he'll gain affinity with all magical attributes. Lin begins reflecting on all magical attributes and gets excited, saying that if he can become a sage-level mage, things will be much easier, and the higher the risk, the greater the reward. That's the kind of trade-off that's worth it. Excited to discover he can get even stronger and master all magical attributes, he starts heading toward the academy. He looks back and tells little Jack and Nike to wait for him, because the young master will return triumphant. Little Jack excitedly wishes his master good luck, while the elf, overjoyed with everything, says everything will be all right. Inside the school, everything ran on magic. Students receiving deliveries, others learning how to cast spells. Seeing all of it, the protagonist says this is exactly what he expected from a magic academy. He approaches a statue and stares at it. Suddenly, someone calls out to him saying that Associate Dean Oliver is away on business and won't be there for a while. He turns and looks at the man speaking to him. The man explains that Oliver made an exception for him, but the academy has a tradition and he'll need to follow him for the entrance test. Lin smiles and says he has no problem with that. Elsewhere, several people were gathered, wondering if the people entering the association were talented. Some said they believed the magic affinity or talent level must be at least average or high, but most thought they were just average. One student shouted that maybe one of them is high level since he was chosen by Oliver. Suddenly, the protagonist shows up, and people are a bit startled, saying he's arrived. Without hesitation, he walks past everyone like a true king. A man holding a crystal ball calls Lin and says his name is Fred Edmund, and he will test the protagonist's magical talent. He asks if Lin is ready. The protagonist smiles and says yes. Fred says he admires the protagonist's confidence. He tosses the crystal ball and tells Lin to just relax his mind and place his hand on it. However, Lin hesitates for a moment, realizing he forgot to check something. He calls the butler and asks if the ranch will be detected by the crystal, because if they discover Yia's existence, it could be a huge problem. The system tells him not to worry, as the crystal only detects his magical talent level and nothing more. Fred calls Lin's attention, saying he's taking too long. The protagonist apologizes, starts to focus, and places his hand on the magical crystal, thinking that his magical talent shouldn't be bad since his father was a genius. Suddenly, the crystal begins to change color and emit a yellow light. Fred is impressed and wonders if that's really the supreme level, because if that's the case, then Lin is truly discreet. He reflects that the academy has never made exceptions before to keep things fair, and he even complained to Oliver about it. But that child, he asks if someone like that could really exist. Then he suddenly starts laughing and kneels down, announcing that Lin Lanster's test result shows low talent level, fire element, and weak affinity. Everyone around begins to feel disappointed, including the protagonist, who keeps trying to pour more of his magic into the crystal, asking how that could be possible. But Fred turns around, clearly uneasy about the situation. The butler appears again, saying that unfortunately the protagonist didn't let him finish speaking earlier. He explains that Lin's magic awakening method is different from everyone else's, so his talent is limited according to his current magic level, meaning his talent will only increase as his magic level rises. Lin asks if the butler is joking. The students around start commenting, saying he's weak and that, despite all the talk about him, there's nothing special. He's not even average, and that makes others question why Oliver chose someone like that. Fred approaches Lin, sighs, and says that the associate dean made an exception for him, so Fred can't say much. He hands Lin his materials and asks him to show up the next day on time. Suddenly, someone approaches and calls out to him. The butler warns that an important quest character has been detected. He says the person's name is Augustine and his position is president of the Truth Student Union. The butler explains that the quest requires the protagonist to defeat him in the Mage's Trial Tower to obtain the fragment of the Water Dragon Egg. However, that will only unlock after completing the pre-quest of the Mage's Trial. Quest difficulty: high. Lin is surprised and starts to wonder if the system can really assess other people's strength, and it seems his first target won't be easy. Augustine walks up to him and politely demands that he give up his student uniform and badge and leave the academy immediately. He says he doesn't know what tricks the protagonist used to deceive the associate dean, but for garbage like him to sneak into the academy with such underhanded methods, just standing there already stains the academy's honor. Hearing this, Lin starts remembering his childhood, being humiliated by other children, told to go away, asked if he thought a trader's son could just buy cereal from the store. Those people insulted him, saying that for trash like him, born of a fool, just standing there polluted the air they breathed. The protagonist starts smiling and says that, for a president, Augustine sure talks like a gangster. He asks Augustine one thing: isn't a president who stubbornly belittles others just because they're less privileged the one truly staining the academy's name? Other students nearby ask where Lin's going with that, saying someone like him, who came in through the back door, has no right to talk about dignity. One of them adds that the president shouldn't stress over a student like that at wars. He won't even pass the test, so sooner or later he'll be expelled anyway. Lin begins to get irritated and fire magic starts forming in his hand, but he takes a deep breath and thinks he needs to calm down. Even though he's furious, he doesn't want to give up. He admits to himself that it's true he entered through the back door and that arguing is pointless. If he can't get along with his classmates and teachers, his studies will suffer, and that'll make it much harder to build a solid foundation to become a sage-level mage. The protagonist turns around and starts walking, leaving them standing there. However, the people begin to laugh, saying he talks too much and does too little, pointing out that he's running away like a coward. He looks back irritated, thinking that he needs to find the fastest way to become stronger, realizing he can't rely on the system alone anymore. With hatred in his heart for being treated like that his whole life, judged because of his father and his family and looked down upon himself, he swears that he'll use his own strength to make them all swallow their words. Shortly after, the butler welcomes the host back to the Dragon Ranch. He brings a report saying that the dragon scale fruit is ripe today, and that the small fire habitat is also producing normally. However, the fire dragon Yiya is upset. Yiya starts sucking in air and spits fire at the protagonist, yelling angrily and asking why he still hasn't upgraded the habitat. Lin brings some fruit to the dragon, asking him to be a little more patient and endure for just 2 more days. After that, he promises to make the change. He asks the dragon to eat some of the dragon scale fruit first, but Yiya refuses and starts throwing a tantrum, saying the protagonist said the same thing 2 days ago and that he won't eat anything else if the habitat isn't upgraded. Lin starts force-feeding the fruit to the dragon and says he really will keep his promise next time. The dragon calls him a liar and asks if Lin really thinks he'll care just because he was fed. The protagonist sighs and says his dragon really acts like a child, then tells the butler he wants to leave. While being teleported back, he thinks that the small fire habitat generates 500 gold per day and that, after planting a few fruits, he still has a bit of money left. However, to upgrade the small fire habitat, he'll need 10,000 gold. The next day, he gets up and says he needs to find a quick way to make money. While getting dressed, he says he could work as a waiter, transport goods, or even take on a few mercenary quests. He thinks that raising a child really isn't easy. Suddenly, he hears a sweet voice calling him, saying it's time for breakfast. He opens his bedroom door, saying he's on his way. But when he sees Nike, he's speechless. She shows him her outfit, saying the inn servant told her it was the outfit he picked for her. Embarrassed, she asks if he thinks it looks strange. He starts walking, and as he passes by her, says that to be honest, since he entered the academy, Vivian is the first person who didn't judge him based solely on rumors. He thanks her again for everything she did for him today and, smiling, says he'll treat her to dinner once he passes the test. He says goodbye and keeps walking away. She hears everything and is left speechless, holding her dress with a bit of shyness. But then she remembers someone asked her if she remembered what her task was, emphasizing that she must do whatever it takes to stay close to the student Lin. And so, a bit flustered and uncomfortable, she says that the apologies she made earlier weren't because of those students' behavior. A little later that day, at the protagonist's residence at the academy, Little Jack asks his young master to stop reading those books and eat something. He says he'll eat and asks Jack to wait just a bit longer so he can finish the book. Night falls and Little Jack remains annoyed, saying his master has been reading since early morning. The protagonist says he only has 1 week until the test, so he has to move fast to have time to finish reading everything. 5 days later, Lin is completely worn out, lying in the middle of the books. He holds his head and says that must have been what the hint was referring to. The key to solving those problems is yaya. The art of potion alchemy requires great mental fortitude. Beginners have low control over their minds, and therefore many require dragon saliva as an additional ingredient in their first attempts. But if the procedure is done that way, even ordinary people can create high-level potions that can be compared to those made by renowned alchemists. A few more days passed, and finally the day of the potion test arrived. After finishing his potion, all the other students said it had to be some kind of joke and questioned whether he really managed to create a real potion, asking how he had achieved such sharp mental focus. Shua got angry and yelled that the protagonist was a cheater. Yisha smacked him on the head with a piece of paper. She got annoyed and asked what they thought they'd accomplish by causing a ruckus during an evaluation, questioning if they all wanted to fail immediately. Shua got sad, lowered his head, thinking his teacher was fiercer than a mad dog. And he's literally a dog. The teacher began staring at the protagonist and looked at the potion he created. She started wondering if he really managed to get such a refined reagent using only his own skills. Then she used her magic to pick up the potion and said yes and thinks that something very strange is happening because he and Vivian only met once, and even if they talked for a long time, it wouldn't be enough for her to be confessing to him. Compared to the previous quest, this one seems like a huge joke. The butler announces once again that the second main quest is in progress, Vivian's bridal carry. The protagonist yells, asking if that little cub can really revive the other wolves. Lin says that if they stop to analyze the situation, all the others were revived by that white pup, so the key to getting out of there for good is that being. The protagonist begins fighting the wolves again and starts defeating them easily. However, every time he defeats one, it's revived. The protagonist thinks this really will never end because he won't be able to find a chance to deal with that wolf pup if he's surrounded by so many wolves all the time. Vivian begins reciting her magic again, saying, "Oh, great wind, your believer prays to you. Turn into a sharp blade and destroy the enemy." An attack shoots from her and quickly heads toward the pup. The protagonist says she's really amazing. However, the pup senses the attack coming and starts growling again, creating a barrier in front of itself that blocks the attack. Both of them are shocked, as they didn't expect it to defend itself. Vivian starts trembling upon seeing that the little pup was able to create an immunity shield. She remembers a merchant fleet so large that only that child returned. People around her used to say they heard it was an encounter with an 8th-ranked demonic beast. The escort team couldn't break through the immunity shield, and when reinforcements arrived, only that child was left alive, hidden under a pile of adult corpses. Remembering that, she starts screaming that they can't fight, and repeats it several times, dropping her magical weapon. She curls up in a corner, saying their magic won't be able to break through that level of immunity shield. Trembling with fear, she asks the protagonist if they're really going to die. Lin keeps fighting and asks what's going on with her since she's completely in shock. He starts getting irritated with the situation and yells that they're not going to die. He starts defeating multiple wolves one after another in seconds and shouts for her not to be afraid because there's definitely a way and he's right there and won't let anything happen to her. That scene she just witnessed starts to clear in her mind and she remembers it happening once before. Someone was in front of her fighting a monster and told her not to be afraid because he was there and wouldn't let anything happen to her. Vivian starts to wonder if this is really happening again. She also questions what she's doing since she had sworn never to hide behind others again. Her conscience starts pressuring her, asking if she's unique. Fire Fist. Reward, beginner to master Fire Magic Notebook X1. Lin is surprised and asks if there really was such a reward. Vivian approaches, saying they have to leave quickly because that portal seems to be the right one. The protagonist walks up to the portal and begins to extend his hand to test it. Vivian looks at him and realizes, now that she's calmed down, that his body is completely injured. After testing the portal, Lin says it feels the same as when they first entered, so it must be real. Without showing her face, she says that if she had been more useful, he wouldn't have gotten hurt like that. He scolds her, saying she's apologizing again. She tries to explain, but the protagonist interrupts, saying it's just a small injury and she doesn't need to worry. He takes her hand and, smiling, starts walking through the portal, adding that he truly wants to see the sky with her. The two of them begin to pass through these portal. The system congratulates them for completing the test, saying Vivian received a B- while Lynn got an A+. These results will be reported soon. Upon exiting the portal, Lynn says something feels strange and questions why his body suddenly feels so relaxed and that all his wounds have vanished. The protagonist assumes the butler secretly helped heal him. However, it was only after reading the student manual that he found out. There are two ways to exit. Nike was reading the book to him and says that although the pain feels real, once someone leaves the test, they are unscathed. The protagonist lies on the table and asks why he didn't properly read the student manual before. Still, he gets up and says maybe it was a good thing, because he truly fought for his life. If he hadn't, he might have been eaten by a wolf, and that would have been far more painful. Quickly, the story starts spreading around the school. One student asks his friends if they heard something strange, because last night the talentless rookie completed the third-year student's test dimension. Another student is shocked and asks how that's possible. Freshmen aren't allowed in those places. The first guy says that's true, but people are saying it was a senior in charge of the test dimension, and the teachers are investigating to see what they find. The student yells, asking if that means Lynn actually completed the test. The first guy confirms and emphasizes that he even got an A+. And after that incident, the teachers now suspect there was a mistake during the protagonist's entrance exam and are allowing him to retake the test. Inside the Truth Student Union, students are gathered around a magic crystal, waiting for the results to be revealed. They're shocked, asking if someone is messing with them, because in the second test, the protagonist's talent and fire affinity became mid-level. They start questioning how that's possible. Just a day ago, he was a weakling. Augustine sits on his couch drinking, annoyed by all the chatter around him, until he yells at them to stop and stop being so arrogant. He turns, irritated, grabs his coat, and says class is almost over, so they should get ready for patrol. While leaving, he says he'll find a chance to see for himself whether Lynn is truly capable. Elsewhere, the protagonist looks around wondering why he suddenly has a sinking feeling. The buyer trying to purchase his potions asks why he's backing away, saying if the offer is too low, they can renegotiate. Lynn apologizes and says he just got lost in thought. Still, he offers to sell 15 potion bottles for 20,000 gold coins because the merchant seems honest. The merchant, without hesitation, agrees, saying that's a fair price since the potions are top quality. After the deal, the merchant says goodbye and tells the protagonist he's welcome anytime. They're willing to be. With that, he gains 5 experience points, 200 gold, now totaling 27 out of 200 XP, and unlocks a new area, Dragon Training Field. The system asks if he wants to go there now. Lynn is excited about the new training field and Yia asks if it's a new place to have fun. He calls her to take a look and snaps his fingers, asking the butler to teleport them there. While being teleported, the protagonist wonders what the new. They realize it's nothing like that. He asks what they could possibly do on that platform. Yia also gets annoyed, asking if the butler is joking with her. The system appears, asking them not to be impatient, since the more tasks the protagonist completes, the bigger the training field will become. After completing all the tasks, he'll unlock the dragon wave, the interactive dragon wand 1,000 times. Upon hearing the sound and movement of the wand, Yia becomes amazed and delighted. The protagonist throws the wand to the ground and asks if that's not for cats. Wondering if the butler really thinks that changing to the butler's training, he should just think of it as playing with his little one. He starts waving the wand with the dragon, and the two begin to play. Quickly, his progress begins to rise. However, the protagonist's energy was also running low. He sits on the ground, asking when this will end and whether the training is for him or for Yia. He gathers all his strength and starts waving it as fast with her isn't a smart move, but he remains silent, staring at her. Suddenly, she's surprised, thinking there's no way he could have done that, because the flames didn't rise up through her water column. She realizes it was the protagonist who controlled them to go up. The fireballs begin to gather around her, making her wonder if he's truly capable of controlling the fire element so skillfully. Lynn smiles and says that thanks to her, he had time to prepare that spell. He begins casting his magic again, saying, "O spirits of fire, resounding between heaven and earth, please answer my call and let the meteor fire fall." Countless fireballs are immediately created and fired at the professor. Yisha starts thinking that Lynn hasn't just become a third-rank mage, but also learned the art of meteor fire, which is nearly impossible for someone at his level. With that, she admits the protagonist has grown beyond her expectations. A massive explosion erupts in the arena. Vivian and the dog ask if Lynn managed to win, but another student says there's no way that happened. How could the professor be defeated like that? As all the smoke begins to clear, the professor appears using a third-rank spell. Night starts thinking that he just heard the spell can transfer magical attacks to the river. So, if magical attacks aren't effective, it's basically the same as the White Wolf's shield. He starts wondering if it's only immune to magic. He begins to advance, thinking that if the fight has reached this point, then his last bet will be that. He gathers flames in his hand and goes for a physical attack, catching the teacher by surprise. She wonders how he figured out that method so quickly. With the physical attack, he manages to break through the water barrier she created and starts chanting his flame summon again, asking it to dance fiercely like a serpent. The attack goes toward the teacher, who responds with her waterfall magic. Her spell manages to contain his and hits him hard, slamming him against the wall separating the arena from the stands. Vivian, beside him on the ground, asks the protagonist if he had just won. So why did that suddenly happen? Shua is confused, asking if their boss lost. However, the teacher intervenes and says that's not what happened. In fact, she was the one who was defeated, admitting she had to break the third-level restriction to defeat the protagonist. She explains that during their battle, she ended up unconsciously seeing him as a true opponent. She turns and starts leaving the arena, wondering aloud what kind of terrifying level he'll reach in the future, as she's truly looking forward to seeing it. Vivian and the dog begin celebrating, and the butler appears to congratulate him, saying that he defeated Yisha and thus completed the main task, gaining dragon egg fragments and magical experience. The king of the Orange Empire, named Levi III, was also watching the match. The protagonist looks at him and realizes he really is there. The king begins to speak and says that everyone is about to enter the Tower of Challenges, as they are not only the elite of the Sacred Iris, but also the future pillars of the Empire. He emphasizes that the Medal of Honor will be awarded to the one who completes the Tower of Challenges first. He raises his hand and shouts for everyone to show what they're capable of. They begin organizing the students, asking them to form a single line to enter the magical tower. Some female students comment that they didn't think the protagonist would get permission to enter the challenge's magic tower, assuming the teacher must have gone easy on him. The same student who is analyzing the entire fight gets irritated by those comments and asks if the student union only knows how to gossip. He emphasizes that he was there as a witness during Lin's fight and that Lin won with his real skills. The girl also gets irritated and says maybe he too was bought off by the protagonist. They begin to argue, and other students ask them to calm down and not fight in front of the magic tower. Another girl at the end of the line observes and asks if the man at the front of the line is the protagonist. The same girl from before points her finger at him and says she doesn't know what he used to fool everyone, but his act will end, because the president of the student union already told everyone that he himself will test Lin's abilities. Seeing this, the protagonist starts thinking about Augustine, and the girl asks if he got scared. However, the protagonist was just thinking that he still has a task to complete, but doesn't know if he's ready to defeat Augustine. Suddenly, the butler appears and announces that the previous task of defeating Augustine in the Tower of Magical Challenges hasn't been completed, and advises the user not to start the next challenge. Lin is confused, asking why the previous task hasn't been completed, as he thought qualifying to enter the magic tower would be enough. However, this means there might be other tasks inside the tower. While he was lost in thought, one of the supervisors called out to him, saying he was the only one left, except for the protagonist. He apologizes and begins entering the magic tower. The king announces that all students have entered and the challenge must now begin. As soon as Lin crosses the portal, he's impressed and asks if that's really the Tower of Magic Challenge, because compared to the Kingdom of Challenges, this feels like an entirely different world. This is the first floor of the Magic Challenge Tower. He notes that it's truly a place meant for veterans in the top 10 strongest. He pulls out the map in his hand and says that before entering, the teacher gave him a map since the tower has a total of 9 floors. Teleport points can be found on the map. On the first 3 floors, each teleport point is protected by magical beasts. Looking at the map, he notices there are many teleport points on the first floor. He starts moving, thinking that being killed by magical beasts or defeated by another student in a magical duel counts as elimination. He continues advancing as fast as he can, since he doesn't know how strong the other students or beasts are, so it's better to run. His strategy is to distance himself from the largest group and head straight to the nearest teleport point. Along the way, he encounters a few magical beasts but defeats them easily. The system congratulates him for defeating a 3rd-rank magical beast, the Dark Knight Leopard. With that, he gains an experience point. He begins breathing heavily and says he finally reached the 3rd floor rather quickly, but the beast level hasn't changed since the 1st floor. He steps into the teleport circle, saying that if his calculations are right, the next floor should have 4th-rank magical beasts. He notes that the higher up the tower, the fewer teleport points there are. That means that going forward, the chances of encountering others increase, so he'll need to be careful. He finally reaches the 4th floor, and someone hidden, holding a magic potion, says they finally found him. Meanwhile, outside, the king watches the Tower of Mage Judgment. Yisha also watches. She thinks that although His Majesty comes every year to watch the battle, what happens inside can't actually be seen from outside. The only thing they can do is observe student movement by the lanterns hanging outside the tower. Suddenly, the lantern on the 4th floor lights up, and she's surprised, thinking someone has already reached the 4th floor. The Judgment Tower is divided into 9 floors. The last 3 floors are mechanism rooms, where students face magical beasts from rank 7 to 9, far above their current level. The middle 3 floors are task phases. Only those who complete the tasks can advance. That's where half of the students will be eliminated. On the first 3 floors, students only need to defeat the beasts guarding the teleport points to advance. Only a few are eliminated there. Teams, betrayals, someone else will definitely not get enough points and be eliminated. Realizing this, he starts running, saying he needs to get ahead of everyone. However, the hidden person was just waiting for an opportunity, and as soon as the protagonist passes by, they throw the flask, saying he must change. But the protagonist notices it in time and uses a fireball to preempt the attack, destroying the flask midair. He's confused, thinking, eliminating students deducts points, so why am I being attacked? He looks at the person who attacked him but realizes he has no time to waste on that and keeps moving forward. The attacker begins laughing and says he's finally been marked. 10 minutes earlier, Augustine and his team were gathered in a part of the 4th floor. He said that apparently the 4th floor wasn't suitable for fighting other students, so he'd have to wait until the 5th floor to confront the protagonist. One of the members grew irritated, saying he couldn't understand why their leader had to stoop to that level to compete with someone like that. Exactly why he won't let the protagonist get a single point. Meanwhile, Lin kept advancing until he finally spotted one of the magical beasts. Know what the protagonist had done to offend him. They pointed out that Lin had been so focused on looking for magical beasts that he hadn't noticed the air, and that if he just lifted his head a bit, he'd see an arrow pointing directly at him, saying, "Lin is right here." The protagonist was surprised and said now it all made sense. That's why people were always ahead of him, no matter where he went. Suddenly, he remembered the red powder and realized it was used in that earlier attack. He stood up, extremely angry with the situation, and Alan said the number of beasts had dropped too fast, asking if the protagonist still planned to keep going. Because even if they didn't interfere anymore, others would keep tracking him, so it was too late to get 1,000 points. Lin tried to destroy the mark with a fireball, but it remained. Alan told him not to waste energy. Those markings couldn't be erased. Saren kept watching from afar, saying that as long as the mark remained, his lackeys would always be one step ahead of the protagonist, taking the magical beasts he could be getting. He emphasized that Lin were 2 markings. Lin began moving fast, saying if they wanted to mark him, then fine. He could easily imitate hundreds of those marks to confuse them. He started using his fire ability to create countless other markings, leaving Saren unsure of what to do. Seeing no other choice, Saren began hunting magical beasts himself, since there were still 29 left. He pointed out that there were very few magical beasts remaining and refused to believe the protagonist would manage to get his 1,000 points to pass. The other students start succeeding one after another. Lin keeps moving forward as only 8 magical beasts remain and he has a total of 600 points. He says he's almost there and continues searching. He just needs 2 more beasts. However, the system shows that only 1 beast remains, and this leaves him frozen. He punches a nearby rock in frustration because even if he defeats the last one, he still won't have enough. Since only 1 magical beast remains for the current floor's hunting task, the desperate attack effect has been activated. The student who defeats the last magical beast will receive a reward package. The package will randomly grant between 0 and 999 points when opened. Time limit to complete the task, 1 hour. Please participate actively in this hunting task if your points are insufficient. Upon seeing that he still has a chance and charges forward with everything he's got. Other students also keep searching for the beast, but none of them manage to find it, as it hides very well. They comment that it was expected to be hard to find, but they don't care and decide to head to the central teleportation circle and rest a bit. Meanwhile, at the central teleportation circle, Augustine was already there with some of his team members. A woman asked the president if Saren isn't going too far this time, because if they use tactics like that against a first-year freshman, their council's credibility will be damaged. Augustine asks if she's seriously saying he went too far because the tower is a place that only allows the strong. If Lin can't even handle small fish like Saren, then he's not worth his time. The protagonist keeps advancing as fast as possible, but he notices there are only 15 minutes left, and at this rate, he won't make it. He asks the butler to activate his Wolf King title, a skill earned after defeating the lesser White Wolf during the 5th challenge. This skill allows the user to summon and command a pack of magical wolves. The protagonist gathers a pack around him and says their target is a 4th-class fire beast, and their mission is to find it for him. With that, he gives the order and the wolves charge ahead. The other students are startled, asking where so many wolves came from. Another one comments in surprise that those are summoned beasts. Alan observes the number of wolves and says he doesn't know anyone in their class who can summon. Here's someone behind him, saying they're really impressed he's using such a valuable item there. And apparently he's not afraid to spend money during the challenge. Lin is surprised to see that someone got there before him. He turns around, irritated, saying that person must be Saren. Lin asks if he's already defeated the last beast. Saren tells him not to be so scared because when the wolves howled for the protagonist, he just happened to be nearby. However, it seems the last magical beast is inside the volcano. The other students start arriving, saying they can't believe it, and that's why no one could find it in time. Saren keeps mocking him, telling the protagonist to just give up and admit it. He may have conspired against Lin on this floor, but all is fair in war. He points out that this is actually a good lesson for Lin to witness firsthand the savagery of human nature. Lin asks if he really expects a thank you for that. Saren smiles and asks if he's not happy with the result. But then Lin jumps into the volcano, leaving him shocked. He asks what's going through the protagonist's head to do that. But Lin states that losing like this isn't fair and no one would be happy with that. A countdown appears saying there are only 2 minutes left. He dodges a strong flame heading his way and thinks that while he's inside the Tower of Challenge, he won't die, even if seriously injured. So hard he tries to break free, he realizes it's incredibly strong. A giant spider starts approaching and he's shocked, realizing that the last magical beast, the one hiding inside the volcano, is that massive monster now standing right in front of him. He starts yelling that he's going to become that thing's next meal. Lin begins using his fire magic, saying he needs to burn those webs as fast as possible so he can fight. However, his fire magic does nothing. The monster keeps approaching and attacks, piercing both his legs, causing him to scream in pain. The system appears and states that this is a fourth-class creature, the fire spectral spider, a giant spider that lives in the crater of a volcano. Its golden silk is extremely resistant to heat sources. Not even flowing lava can burn it. It enjoys torturing its prey until they can no longer fight, then devours them slowly. Lin asks if the system couldn't have shared this extremely important info earlier. Suddenly, the spider attacks again, piercing his hand. He starts getting angry, thinking he can't afford to lose focus. He notes that even though he can't destroy the web and is immobilized, he can still cast magic. He begins casting a spell, but the spider attacks him 3 more times, stabbing his body again. Even in extreme pain and on the brink of defeat, he can that shell. Suddenly, he sees the remaining time is under a minute and panics, realizing he's running out of time. From this, he concludes that there's really no other way. He suddenly notices the spider's eyes are exposed. If he can see its eyes, that means the shell doesn't cover the entire body. So, if he can use the fire serpent spell to penetrate its defenses, he might have a chance. With difficulty, he manages to free one hand and begins casting his spell, but then he feels a tremor and intense pressure, making him think the volcano is about to erupt. The spider shoots more webbing, covering the protagonist's mouth and preventing him from casting spells. The butler warns that flame spiders enjoy consuming prey that has been burned by magma from active volcanoes. Lin gets even more frustrated, asking if that's why the spider stayed there for so long, and questions again why the butler couldn't have warned him earlier. Because if the volcano hadn't erupted at that exact moment, maybe he could have won. The spider prepares to strike him as the volcano awakens, spewing magma everywhere. From afar, the student union is monitoring the situation. Saren starts laughing, saying he had already warned that a bastard like that couldn't be a rival to his master. He turns and says the president should come with him, since they have a duel on the next floor. However, Augustin asks if they really think they can leave, and reminds him that it's good. He hasn't forgotten the current mission still isn't over. Saren comments that his master's tongue is sharp as ever, noting that there are only a few seconds left, and questions whether the president really thinks the protagonist will survive that. The remaining time is just 30 seconds. Lin gathers all his strength and punches the spider in the jaw, shattering its fangs. The butler appears, congratulating the farmer for completing the special achievement, Baptism of Fire. Amid the flames and magma, the protagonist stands as if nothing affects him, thanks to the fire magic immunity effect. His own body was forced to endure the molten lava, now granting him physical resistance similar to the flame dragon Yiya. From now on, this resistance will grow as Yaya's level increases. Normal physical attacks can no longer injure him. Lin looks at his body and says it's truly amazing. Even he managed that and how many points it's worth, telling him to open it right away. He says he will, but first asks if any kind soul would lend him some clothes. A girl hands him some clothes and the protagonist thanks her. She says it's no trouble at all, pointing out that her miniaturization potions are incredible. Besides school uniforms, she can carry all sorts of things. She walks up to him and says, to be honest, she's been tracking his progress since he entered the tower, as rumors are spreading that he's a rising genius. A genius being compared to Augustine. She smiles, introduces herself as Dia, and asks if he'd like to form a team with her in the next floor if he passes. Lin feels a bit confused, thinking the situation is strange, since that girl is his senior. However, her smile is strikingly similar to Vivian's, and he wonders if it's just because they're both beautiful. Alan then comes running, saying the protagonist can count on him too, since the next floor has 5th-rank magical beasts, and they won't be able to handle them alone. He adds that on the current floor, he was tricked by evildoers and end up unintentionally getting in the protagonist's way, so now he's willing to lick his boots to make up for it on the next floor. Lin starts pushing him away, asking him to back off a bit, but Alan keeps begging for a chance. Saren approaches and says they might be talking about the next floor too soon. He points out that even if the protagonist was lucky enough to defeat the beast, if the reward orb doesn't grant him 400 points, then he's done for. Everyone tells him to open it right away to see what's inside. The system informs that he must break the golden orb to reveal the score. Lin holds it with both hands, focuses, and asks that the points inside be enough. He slowly opens the orb. As soon as he does, he's congratulated for earning 399 points. However, he's extremely frustrated, saying he needed just one more point. Saren bursts out laughing in his face. The system appears, saying that the 4th floor test of the Mage Challenge Tower has ended. Students who reached a total of 1,000 points during the test will be sent to the 5th floor. Those who fail to reach that score will be eliminated from the trial and sent outside the tower. Please prepare to be teleported. Saren keeps mocking him, saying he deserved it. No one told him to think he could steal the chance to fight the president. Dia scolds him, calling him trash for celebrating such an empty victory. Lin lowers his head and tells his senior to let it go. Upset by the situation, he thinks that he already struggled enough just to survive back there, so he'll leave without regrets. With that, people are teleported to the 5th floor of the Mage Challenge Tower. At the central teleportation circle, people start cheering, as the protagonist also appears there. They note that apparently, he wasn't eliminated. The other students find it very strange, since all the eliminated ones were already sent away, yet Lin is still there and wasn't removed with them. They start wondering if it's because he was the only one to complete the final mission of the 4th floor. Some people begin getting irritated, asking if that means advancing to the next. Out that it's exactly that. The challenge tower itself allowed Lin to advance, so he never cheated. The system then announces that the 5th floor of the Mage Challenge Tower is beginning, and the win condition is a duel between 2 teams. The winner will take all of the other team's points. The students start panicking, realizing that if a tournament is happening, that means half the participants will be eliminated. The system continues and explains that participants must confirm their duels using identification cards. These ID cards can be obtained by hunting magical beasts. Students without cards cannot challenge or eliminate others. Whoever has cards will have the advantage. The system goes on, stating that for each beast defeated, 200 points will be subtracted. For attacks against students without cards, 1,000 points will be deducted. Anyone with a negative score will be automatically eliminated. If the negative score results from attacking a player without a card, that player will automatically advance to the next floor. Remaining beasts, 500. Students, 70. The students are shaken, saying they only have 1,000 points, and that every magical beast defeated deducts 200. That means they can only attempt to move on 5 times. Descriptions appear stating that the target for elimination will be randomly chosen, due to the need for an even number of participants. Lin, the student with the highest score under 1,000, was included to make up for the missing player. Saren becomes completely furious, saying that's why he advanced. The protagonist celebrates, saying he really didn't waste his time in that hellish volcano. He walks over to his senior and says they can officially form a team. She agrees without hesitation and asks what they'll do about that other person. Alan grabs the protagonist's leg again, saying he'd even serve as a shield if he could just come along. Lin starts shaking his leg, shouting for him to let go, but Alan clings tightly, saying he won't let go even if he dies, that he'll hold on forever. Dia is impressed by his determination. Meanwhile, a tentacle starts approaching them. The 3 of them sense something strange and look back, but nothing is there. Dia asks if he saw anything. The protagonist says it felt like something was floating nearby, but it was probably just his imagination. She says most of the teams have already started searching, so they better hurry or they'll fall behind. He tells Alan that if he wants to follow them, that's fine, but the distribution of ID cards will depend on each person's effort, so if he doesn't pull his weight, he'll be the last to get one. Alan is happy with that, saying that as long as he can follow his new master, he doesn't care about the details. He adds that he knows the protagonist will be fine, so if he can do it, Alan can too. Lin starts getting irritated, telling Alan to stop rubbing his face against his legs. Dia starts laughing at the scene, saying the 2 of them are hilarious. Meanwhile, the same tentacle starts appearing again. Outside, His Majesty is informed that According to the external observation post of the challenge tower, all participants have now reached the 5th floor. The king is surprised, saying that in previous years, nearly half the students had been eliminated by this stage. That means this year's participants are truly impressive, and it looks like he'll have to prepare more prizes. The teacher is still standing, watching closely. She thinks it's not quite like that, because even if the students this year are indeed of higher quality than previous ones, and the attacking, and says that based on her field combat experience, the harder a beast is to defeat, the greater the chance of it dropping valuable items. Besides, their individual scores aren't very high. Together, they'd only have 14 chances, so they need to choose their targets wisely. The protagonist strikes a rock hard. The three of them stand there, staring, since they still haven't obtained their ID cards. Daya has 200 points remaining, Alan also has 200 points, and the protagonist has 399 points. Daya crouches down, slightly disheartened, and says each of them has only one chance. Alan gets frustrated too and punches a tree, saying the drop rate is extremely low. Lin asks if the chance of getting an ID card really depends solely on luck. Such an important item needed to advance? While he's thinking about that, something grabs him by the waist and quickly ensnares the other two as well. Alan yells that it's a third-rank beast, the man-eating plant. He's confused, saying the 5th floor should only have 5th-rank beasts, so why is that thing here? Lin notes that he was so lost in thought he didn't even notice it approaching. He says the creature isn't complicated to understand, but once it chooses and marks its prey, it immediately calls for reinforcements and won't stop until its target is dead. If caught by one of them, it's best to fight with everything you've got to escape as quickly as possible. He looks to the side and sees that no companion Alan and asks what he's doing and why. Alan gets angry and shouts at the protagonist, saying he's so sly, and asks why he acted like that. Lin is confused by these words, but Alan keeps yelling, saying Lin didn't realize that no one there wanted to fight, because they all wanted to sacrifice someone else to save themselves. And that's why he chose to step up and save the team. That's why seeing Lin act like that is so frustrating. He turns away and admits he's a selfish and cowardly person, someone who never dared to step forward when something happened. But even he can't keep living like that anymore. He starts gathering his magic and shouts that he no longer wants to live with guilt. He says the protagonist accepted him even after all the trouble he caused on the previous floor, so how could he go on living with that guilt? He begins reciting his spell. However, he's interrupted when Dia throws one of her vials, saying that it's just a third-rank creature, so why are they making such a fuss? Alan gets annoyed and says she stole all his hard work. She replies that both of them are way too serious, so she won't do it again. Then she asks how she can become their best friend after they leave the tower. Hearing those words, the protagonist freezes, thinking about what she said about being best friends. However, the three of them begin to feel the roots binding them squeeze tighter. Alan asks her, if she didn't kill the real man-eating plant, then why is this happening? Daya replies that she's not sure either. Her points weren't deducted, so the potion she threw earlier wasn't enough to defeat the monster. She's shocked and says that maybe that monster isn't a real man-eater, but rather a disguised 5th-rank monster, the puppet tree. She explains that usually when encountering man-eating vines, they react instantly and aggressively, but the vines of the puppet tree tighten more and more the more the victim struggles, luring prey with the appearance of normal vines until death. Alan gets angry and says he's never seen such a despicable tree. The protagonist asks how they're supposed to deal with something like that. Daya explains that someone has to dig up the roots of the puppet tree and destroy them. Only then can everyone be saved. However, since they're all trapped, there's no one to do it. She begins to cry, saying there's no hope because they're all doomed. However, Lin breaks free easily and says that if that's the problem, then he'll dig up the roots himself. The other two are shocked, asking how he got free. He starts laughing and says, to put it simply, because his body is so strong, the roots that tried to strangle him ended up destroying themselves. He thinks to himself that it was actually due to the volcano's influence that his body became as tough as his dragons. But he can't reveal the truth, and asks if they understood. The two are stunned, and Daya asks if that means he knows how to use a knight's fighting spirit. Alan is amazed, saying his fighting spirit level is incredibly high. Lin is pleased, thinking that not only did they buy it, they even helped come up with such a solid explanation. That's just what he'd expect from his best friends. He gets ready and says they can't waste any more time. It's time to hunt. Somewhere else, Saren keeps bothering his president, questioning why he's acting that way when he said they'd duel on the 5th floor. The girl with them yells for him to stop this nonsense and asks if he doesn't know that attacking a non-random target results in a 1,000-point deduction. She asks if he wants the president to be eliminated. Saren yells back that he knows, but he just can't understand why his leader wants to meet with the protagonist. Every time Lin is mentioned, he questions the president, asking what exactly Lin did to deserve so much attention. Augustin looks at him, walks over, and shows him a card. But the girl quickly interrupts, asking how the president could let Saren see his ID card, pointing out that the real target is the protagonist. So what will happen if Saren does something foolish again to prevent that duel? Augustine replies that it won't matter. Saren will never be able to face Lin on equal footing. Saren is left in shock by his president's words. He stands there, trembling with rage, wondering if he truly will never be able to defeat the protagonist, and why his president would say something like that. He wonders if it's because Lin went into the volcano and he didn't. He recalls the president's ID card and thinks even the Tower of Judgment sees the protagonist as a more suitable rival for Augustine. This fills him with fury. He jumps and charges ahead alone, thinking that they should all just watch, because the one unfit to be the president's rival is Lin. Meanwhile, around the puppet tree, the protagonist has already created a crater but hasn't found the roots. He keeps digging, even with his hands all injured, thinking how deep they must be. Not only are they incredibly deep, but the soil is extremely hard. He thinks those roots know exactly how to hide. He keeps digging, thinking it should be soil, but it's as hard as metal. Even with a body as tough as his dragon's, he'll still get hurt if he keeps digging non-stop. However, Dia had said the roots are about 2 meters below the surface, so he should find them soon. Alan thinks the protagonist is pushing himself too far. Dia agrees, saying that even if that magical beast could drop an ID card, Lin could have abandoned them long ago. She points out that he can't use magic as it could agitate the puppet tree, and he doesn't even have tools to dig. Suddenly, Alan spots something and shouts to the protagonist that there's something moving to his right. Lin stands up, extremely annoyed, saying he'd been wondering why he couldn't find it. And now, it's clear. It keeps moving. He punches toward the root, telling it to stop, but it keeps crawling and he keeps striking. Suddenly, his body begins to be enveloped by a light armor, and he hears the spirit of wind, who wanders between sky and earth. Hear my prayer and clothe our warrior in battle gear. Water also begins to gather around him, and he hears, oh, glowing wine. They can for earning their identification cards. Lin is happy and asks if that obedient thing really had an ID. Was it the one that appeared? The other two are finally released, and Alan says he did an excellent job and managed to get his ID card. Dia adds that he should keep the certification because he deserves it. The protagonist turns to them and says it's not quite like that because it's not just his ID card. He shows that he has 3 of them. The two get extremely excited and ask if a magical beast can really drop, crying, saying that even he was acknowledged. He hugs the protagonist, saying it's all thanks to him. Dia is also overjoyed, saying that if it weren't for Lin, they wouldn't have gotten this far. They agree it's now time to hurry, train, and prove they truly deserve their ID cards. Alan is happy, saying Dia gave him an incredibly good elixir because he's fully recovered. Even his fruit was restored. He asks if she wants to become his older sister. She's confused, asking why he loves having older siblings so much. While the two are talking, the protagonist looks at his ID card and sees that his opponent is Augustine. Dia says her opponent is the vice president, Grenna, and Alan says his is Saren. But once he realizes what he just said, he freezes in shock, remembering how strong his opponent is. He runs over to the protagonist and clings to him, begging him to save his life. Lin tells him to use the determination and mindset he had when they were defeating the puppet tree because he is the team's observer. Suddenly, some attacks come toward them and the protagonist notices. He shouts that a sneak attack is incoming, uses his shield to protect them, and warns his companions to be careful. He keeps focusing on building a counterattack but realizes that the magic is extremely powerful and his shield can't hold it. Alan grows worried and asks why the protagonist helped block the attack, saying he doesn't feel worthy of being saved by his captain. Lin, even while injured, says there's a reason Alan calls him older brother. Dia tells everyone to stay alert. Saren appears, laughing, consumed by hatred. He starts shouting, asking if his president is watching, demanding he look at the protagonist and questioning if he still thinks Saren isn't worthy of facing Lin since he can't even withstand one of Saren's attacks. Dia asks why he always resorts to sneak attacks. Alan agrees and says that, besides, the opponent Saren should be after is him, not Lin. Alan keeps questioning if Saren isn't afraid of being eliminated for randomly attacking an opponent. Saren starts laughing and asks what he's talking about. He never attacked the protagonist. His target has always been Alan. He prepares another attack, saying he never focused his strikes on Lin. It was the protagonist who helped Alan block it. He says Alan had already entered the floor before, so he should know. The tower uses the block target to determine the opponent, and since he stepped away and ran, he wouldn't be able to do anything now. He launches his attack, and Alan says winning without fighting fairly will only make more people despise to defend them from all the blows, and quickly finds the real one, saying that he's right there. As soon as he gets the information on where the real one is, the protagonist dashes like a true flame bolt and charges toward his opponent. Saren only smiles, asking if the protagonist is really going to attack him head-on like that. However, the protagonist doesn't attack him. He grabs him, asking what he just said. questioning if it wasn't the tower that scared and asks what he's trying to do. The two start falling off the cliff and Saren panics. The protagonist asks him if he has time to use the wind wings and uses his firepower to push them even faster downward. The two crash hard into the ground, creating a large crater. The protagonist gets up with a lump on his head, saying that really hurt. However, thanks to his body's resilience, he's fine. His team runs over to him, asking if he's okay, and Dia asks why he always does that kind of dangerous thing. He smiles, saying that at least he's okay, but she asks if he's injured and tells him to drink that recovery elixir to stay standing. He thanks her, saying he's fine. Saren starts to get up with a trembling voice, all battered. He asks if that's why the president said Lin is stronger than him, pointing out that apparently the protagonist is really determined when doing something. He asks again if that's why the president said he's stronger. Lin turns to him, irritated and with a C, and the others work. However, she is astonished, as with just one attack, the protagonist manages to cut off the monster's tentacle. Lin thinks this was already expected, since not only Dragon Wisdom, but all Dragon-type attacks are effective, and Dragon Wisdom is the best skill to break through that monster's defense. However, he doesn't know how much his body will endure. The monster becomes even angrier after having its tentacles cut and attacks the protagonist with all its might. He notices the incoming attack and thinks this is really bad, as just when he activated the dragon's power, he's going to be hit by that attack. However, he hears someone saying, "You really are lucky." Augustine manages to step in and create a barrier to protect them. Grenna starts healing Lin, who shouts for her to stop that and help the president first. However, she yells at him to shut up and stay quiet because the president ordered her to heal him first. The protagonist is confused, and the president says he really figured it out. He emphasizes that he doesn't exactly know why, but among everyone there, the only person who was effective against the monster was Lin. And with a smile on his face, he says maybe being lucky is also important in that kind of situation. He continues looking at the protagonist and says he really doesn't have much optimism about his future. However, even so, having a bit of self-esteem is still good. He emphasizes that Lin should use all the luck he has to survive and asks him to give some of that luck to the others too. Suddenly, the monster. Seeing this, the protagonist starts screaming, as everyone was being attacked and defeated by the monster. Realizing that there's no way out, he thinks he can't do anything else and there's no way to survive and save everyone. He needs Yiya's power. However, he thinks about how his clan was exiled by the Empire because his father released a dragon. So, if they find out he is connected to dragons, his clan's reputation will only get worse. This makes him wonder if he should use his last resort. However, faced with everything, seeing his companions suffering and being killed, he thinks he can't hesitate. Even if they find out, his companion still saved him, and he has to take responsibility and save everyone. He shouts, summoning Yiya, who immediately appears before him. He climbs onto released Yiya. The monster stopped focusing on the students and is only targeting them now. While flying, Yiya tells him there are other humans lying nearby. Lin asks where, and as soon as he looks, he realizes the people lying there are wearing academy uniforms. He remembers the students who were beginning to change their opinion of him. All of them were defeated. The protagonist becomes extremely angry and says that the students who were eliminated on the 4th floor also couldn't escape. He says it's time to launch a counterattack and tells his dragon to use Dragon Force. Yiya lets out a powerful roar, making the monster tremble all over. They split up, and the protagonist tells her to attack from the left while he goes all in from the right, since they first need to eliminate all those annoying tentacles. With fast and precise attacks, they manage to cut off all the monster's tentacles and it starts trying to flee. Lin sees this and gets angry, saying now it wants to run away after causing so much trouble. The monster continues trying to escape, and the butler warns that the energy fluctuation from the clan, an extremely powerful aura begins forming around the monster. The system keeps warning that a powerful dragon aura has been detected, and that they need to evacuate immediately. Lin becomes confused, asking how a dragon aura is being detected, since that monster was a nightmare troll. How can it have dragon energy? Yiya begins to get angry and says that's why she was feeling something strange while fighting. That monster has black scales, dragon scales. The protagonist is even more confused, as Grenna said, nightmares don't have scales. Yiya begins to get furious with the whole situation and says that bastard dared to the area. Wounded, she says that creature, which is neither dragon nor beast, still masters the magic of the dragon clan. Lin realizes his companion is seriously injured and won't withstand another attack of that magnitude. He tells her she doesn't need to face it head-on using magic, and emphasizes that from now on, she must follow his orders. However, Yiya asks if the protagonist is saying her magic is weaker than that freak's and dodge because they'll attack from above. She decides to listen and dodges, and he thanks her for it. The monster continues attacking multiple times, and he asks Yiya to keep dodging everything and find the right distance. And once she finds it, she should leap onto the monster's head, attacking the blind spot. They keep advancing until she gets close enough and attacks the monster. It tries to retaliate, but it's too late. She lands a blow to its forehead. After that, several more attacks continue in sequence. Suddenly, the monster attacks with several smaller tentacles, hitting Yiya. She realizes that her magical power is being drained. The protagonist is shocked that the monster can even absorb a dragon's energy, and without thinking twice, he charges forward, cutting its links to her. However, he gets hit. Yiya becomes worried. Tears start falling from her eyes, as her only friend is being hurt right in front of her. The protagonist begins to fall while coughing up blood, and she can't bear to watch it anymore. Overwhelmed by hatred and rage toward that beast, she starts gathering an immense amount of fire. Even the monster starts to show surprise at the amount of magic being accumulated by the dragon. The protagonist keeps falling, asking what growth value plus 500. The fire dragon's growth value has reached its limit, promoted to rank 4 fire dragon. Yiya keeps tearing the monster apart as if she can't control herself from so much rage. The system reports current classification rank 4. Skills: Crushing Stone Bite, Dragon Breath, Dragon Force, Fire Immunity, Medium, Physical Immunity, Fire Projectile Magic, Shield, Medium, Recovery. Growth value: 1/1000th, Health points: 90/100ths. Lin is stunned by her current strength. It's the strongest in the whole world. He thinks that although her appearance and strength have changed a lot, deep down she's still the same little girl as always. The butler appears, saying that since the ranch owner did almost nothing to help defeat the nightmare troll, he will be rewarded with 5 experience points. He cries, thinking he was almost useless. With that, his current experience points are Level 3, 203/200ths. Promotion to 4th ranking mage available. He lies down, saying that this time he's extremely reluctant to level up. Suddenly he hears, "Problem detected with the test. All students will be teleported out of the tower in 3 minutes." Lin says he already expected that. The students could only leave after the nightmare troll was defeated. He starts asking if the students are still okay. Suddenly, the two hear a faint moan and go on alert. He quickly gets up, asking if that monster isn't dead yet. However, as he gets closer, he realizes that a sphere is near him. He looks closely and says it looks like there's a little dragon inside. Yiya asks if there's really another of her kind. Guys, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content. Thank you.